Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over the market. What a wild roller coaster that we are in, my goodness. But yeah, let's go over the market. I'll go over Tesla stock. I'll give you my thoughts moving into next week. And yeah, let's check out what we can expect in this kind of absolutely bloodbath of a market. I mean, guys, you have to understand, we're talking about SPY here. This isn't like even QQQ or anything like that, or like, you know, the not the Dow Jones, the IWM or anything like that, the Russell. This is SPY, guys. SPY in 2 days from peak. Let's just say from peak to the bottom of today, which is pretty much where we closed the bottom. 11% in 2 days. SPY. Yowza. I mean, that is something else. I mean, even if you put on the Bollinger Bands, for instance, here. Let me go ahead and put on the Bollinger Bands here. I can't remember the last time I have seen like an index like SPY literally fully and utterly outside the Bollinger Bands like this, completely and utterly outside of the Bollinger Bands. Now you can make an argument this is a bearish, a bear exhaustion candle because it's very high volume closing at the bottom of the day. There's arguments to be made that this is an exhaustion candle, but yeah, I don't know. This is wild. There's a few things to talk about, so let's go over it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor, and of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, updates, whatever stocks, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day the market is open. That link, of course, as per usual, is down below in the description of the video. Check it out for just $3 a month. Sorry, my mic is like, check it out. Yeah, $3 a month. I give updates, post updates, blah, blah, blah. Every single day the market is open, mainly on Tesla stocks, sometimes other stocks as well. This is pretty important. I want to go over this actually. Where's it? This one here. But yeah, to check it out, the link is below. $5 a month, and it gives you access instead to the second tier, which gives you access to NVDA updates, plus, of course, everything in the first tier. But jumping into a Tesla, finally kind of catching up to the market here a little bit, down 10.5%, closing at $239.50 per share. And there's yeah, it's in a pretty interesting situation here. So the thing with Tesla, and the thing that's about the broader market, like I said, the QQQs, SPY, very, very high volume. I actually like to see this kind of high volume. That's usually a good sign to see this could be very large capitulation volume, and this could be a bearish exhaustion gap or candle, right? Which theoretically can be finally something bullish, but again, this is not a time to call bottoms, right? Especially because we're closing the VIX at 45 going into the weekend. You got to be careful when the VIX is closing at the top of the at the top of the range going into the weekend. It's not something you should fully underestimate, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? This essentially suggests that the volatility is absolutely not done just yet, and there's a damn good chance that we may get early next week, Monday or Tuesday, a bit more volatility. I do think the market's getting close. I'd be surprised if there's that much more pain ahead, but yeah, I mean, it's a wild roller coaster. 10% for SPY in 2 days that's not something you see every single day. So Tesla is still pretty interesting though. The Tesla is interesting because despite everything losing its momentum, everything is making new lows, right? NVIDIA's new lows, AMD's new lows, Amazon new lows, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Netflix kind of equal lows, actually also showing some strength. But the thing with Tesla is it's the only stock, I mean, to be fair, it did crash pretty aggressively, but it is still, technically speaking, the only stock that hasn't actually breached these lows, right? Where the market bounced from, right? For the most part, and then ultimately went lower, right? Tesla actually did not breach those lows. In fact, it's actually pretty decently above those lows still, right? It's still holding respectably above these lows back down here at about 220, we'll say, right? So that's, that is worth mentioning. I think that is worth mentioning. But there's two major concerns here, and there's two perspectives. And one is bullish, of course, one is bearish. That, I'll be completely honest, full transparency, I'm not sure which one's the correct perspective right now. So let's talk about the bearish one first, right? The bearish perspective is the daily chart. We've been talking about this potential bear flag for quite some time now. Obviously, I did expect it to get one more push up to the top of the flag for that kind of 310 roughly touch point, 305, 310, right, that I've been talking about. That is what I thought would happen, and then we potentially fall back down, right? That was kind of what I was expecting. Obviously, it happened much faster because, again, with bear flags and bull flags, whatever, you usually get you 5 touch points, right? You get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And the 5th touch point is the one usually you fall down, right? We didn't get 5 touch points. We ended up getting just a 1, 2, 3, and then we pretty much fell without getting the 4th. So it's sometimes it happens when the market's this aggressive, but usually you get 5. But nonetheless, the point is the fact that we did break down, right? We did break down, and more importantly, we closed below, right? We closed a daily candle below not only this rising channel that we've clearly fallen out of, but we also closed below the 250-ish range. So those are two things that are definitely concerning, right? I mean, again, in a market like this, technicals they're still effective, but you do take them with a little bit of a more grain of salt, because for all we know, the market can just short squeeze starting Monday and we just blast right back into this channel, right? You do take it with a bit of a grain of salt, if you will. But again, that's all we can deal with right now. That's all we can work with, right? And again, just the way I'm looking at it right now with Tesla, closing down here, we could get a small pop-up maybe early next week or something like that, or I don't know, like by Tuesday or Wednesday or something, right? There is a chance that we get a pop-up back up to about the 250s over here, but we could just get a rejection and then ultimately make our way lower for potentially a double bottom, if not maybe even finally making those new lows that the market already has. Tesla has yet to do that. So this is the more bearish perspective, right? And the thing with this is the fact that the RSI is still looking neutral, I would say. But the 1 hour RSI is the one where and this is more the bullish perspective we'll get into very soon, but the 1 hour RSI hasn't even actually went into oversold territory. You can see here, it's actually, technically speaking, making a hidden bullish divergence, right? These ones are usually harder to spot. They're definitely more difficult to spot, but a hidden bullish divergence looks something like this. Hopefully you can see it. Hopefully this may make sure you guys can, maybe, is this good? I don't know if my camera is blocking. My camera is not blocking it. So this is a hidden bullish divergence where essentially the price is making higher lows and the oscillator is making, sorry, that is not a hidden bullish. It's quite the opposite. I lied. Take everything back. Anyways, nonetheless, regardless, the point I'm trying to make here is the fact that what I'm personally looking for is the fact that I like to see the RSI enter oversold territories, right? It hasn't. It got pretty close here, but it hasn't even entered oversold territories. And again, the thing I'm not sure about with Tesla here is that good, because it's just showing really nice relative strength, regardless, even after today's 10% drop, it is still technically showing relative strength. Or is that bad because that signals that there could be a bit more pain ahead? That's the part I'm still a little bit iffy about, if that makes sense. I'm not 100% sure about, to be completely honest and transparent about you with it, right? So let's see how that plays out, right? But that is overall the more bearish perspective. Now let's talk about the more bullish perspective. Let's say the market, which again, I want to make it clear, the market will get a very violent move back up. These happen all the time because, we have technically entered a bear market, by the way. I want to make that also really clear. The Qs are technically, I don't think SPY is in a bear market yet, but the Qs have entered a bear market. If you go from the all-time highs all the way to the lows today, almost 22%, right? That is, again, over 20% is a bear market, right? 10 to 20 is a correction, like a heavy correction. 5 is like a small correction, and 20 or higher is pretty much bear market territory. And SPY is not just there yet, actually. It's not there just yet, but it's only like 2% away from a bear market as well. So the point is, we're in a bear market. And the thing is when you get these bear market type situations, when the stocks are falling very aggressively, it is at the end of the day still acting like a beach ball underwater. It will at some point, I don't know if it'll be a Monday, another week, like I don't know when, nobody knows when, but what is very high chance of happening, not a matter of if, just when, is the market will rip back up very violently, very quickly, very aggressively. Right? That's just how these things work. It'll happen at some point. We don't know when. Could be Monday, could be Wednesday, could be Friday, could be the week after. But I do expect this to be sooner than later. So the reason I bring that up is because, again, with Tesla, it can just instantly violently get right back into these channels. So again, you want to take these technical analysis, in all with a bit of grain of salt. Now, the one thing I'm looking at Tesla on the more bullish perspective is this, right? There is a bullish perspective here because the bearish perspective, we just talked about essentially the bear flag breakdown. The bullish perspective actually is a valid one. There is still a valid bullish perspective. It's, holding on for dear life, but it's still valid. And that's going to be, simply put, while the RSI is pretty close to being oversold, what I ideally would want to see is maybe a small little bounce like this, come back lower one more time, and then we go up. And then that should hopefully create a bullish divergence on the RSI is what I would prefer to see. But that's not even what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is the fact that this could just be a very large and honestly a pretty wide looking bullish flag, right? Why can this still be technically a bull flag? Well, technically speaking, because we've been making lower lows, lower highs in that smaller-ish time frame, and we started making higher highs and higher lows, right? Here and here. Now we're obviously making lower lows, lower highs, but that's typical in a bull flag. And the reason I'm talking about that is because we did breach these levels before, right? We did breach this lower low, lower high overall movement on the kind of medium term time frame, if you will, right? So that's a good sign, obviously still just from structures, but is the Fibonacci. So if you take the Fibonacci from the overall recent low that we put at pretty much 218 and you bring it to the recent high that we put at pretty much 291 roughly, you can see we are right around that Fibonacci retracement at that 231 to 234-ish level. Now we're not there just yet, which is why I think that there is still a possibility, maybe even just starting Monday, we get right back into it, pretty much at 233 roughly, we'll say. And then from there, we get that bounce back up and potentially a pretty aggressive one. That is a potential. We're already down 0.64% after hours. That is something I'm watching for still, right? So let's see how that plays out. But there is potential that this is still just a very large bull flag setting up for a move higher. Now, if we start losing 230, okay, that's probably not the case anymore, because on top of losing 230, we'll also be losing the flag, right? The channel, if you will, which is essentially both flag. So those are the things I'll be looking for moving into, honestly, as early as next week on Tesla stock, right? It's a big question mark for sure. Nobody knows, but again, when you have something like the VIX closing the day up 50% higher at 45, you are, it's good to be cautious. It's good to be cautious. Some caution is not a horrible thing here whatsoever, right? At least until things are a little bit more settled down. Now, naturally, in theory, which is why I want to talk about this post here, whenever the VIX is very aggressively spiking, that usually is like 50 VIX, usually that is the best time to buy, right? Absolutely, right? If you're just someone that just buys and you don't really look at it anymore, absolutely, this is the time to just be slowly dollar cost averaging, etc. Not financial advice. But here's a pretty interesting chart. I'm not gonna go over it in full detail, but you can pause the screen and take a look at it yourself of what happens to the VIX whenever it gets essentially 45, which is pretty much where it is right now, right? S&P 500 after VIX reaches 45, first case in a month. So 1 day later, 2, 3, 4, 1 week and 2 weeks later, right? And you can see most of the cases, not all, but most of the cases it is higher. Now there's exceptions, like for instance for the 2018, which is kind of similar to what we're in right now. So this could be the situation we're in, you never know. But other than the 2018 situation and all the way back here in 1997, you can see even just a few days later, and especially for most of them, a week later or 2 weeks later, it's well up higher, right? 2002 was 13% higher. 2015 was 4% higher a week later, or like 4 days later. 2020 and 24 was 2 to 3% higher. So, it's not. It's just stats. At the end of the day, this is just stats. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing. It's not telling you what's going to happen for sure. It's just usually in these cases, there's a higher chance it's higher in a week or two than lower than essentially what we close out today. I do think that's going to be the case, but again, nothing is guaranteeing that whatsoever. So, take that for what it's worth, of course, naturally. But those are the main two perspectives I'm eyeballing in Tesla. Taking a quick look at the weekly chart. The weekly chart is looking questionable, no doubt. So we went from 2 bullish hammer candles in a row, from 2 arguably bearish hammer candles in a row on the weekly. This market is just giving everyone the biggest middle finger possible, because this is just something else, man. Like I'd probably have to look back pretty far to see these kind of candles patterns, if you will, forming on Tesla stock or any stock for that matter. Like this is truly just some circus level candle price or candles that I'm looking at, like price action, right? This is just ridiculous. How do you go from these 2 candles here to these 2 candles here? I don't know. It's beyond me. It's very interesting to say the least. But the thing you have to understand is the fact that, and how much does this rising channel matter? Hard to say, because we kind of went below it for 2 weeks, then we had a week that technically closed above it, then we had a week that now closed below it. Now watch us get back above the channel again next week. I don't know, right? So how much does this rising channel really matter? I don't know. Hard to say, right? Hard to say for sure, because it's kind of getting invalidated with this price action here in terms of being truly useful, I guess you can say. So let's see how that plays out next week, of course. But the interesting to note is the fact that the MACD is still making higher lows on the week, which is interesting, right? Despite this week being obviously a substantially down week, the MACD is still making weekly higher lows, which is pretty cool, pretty nice to see, which is okay. That's interesting. So let's see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much all I got right now. I don't think there's that much more to talk about for the most part. In terms of options flow, a lot of puts came in on SPY, by the way, closing the session. A lot of puts came in. So I'd be very careful going into early next week. Wouldn't be surprised if we see one more decent gap down, honestly, to start the day Monday or the week Monday. But I would expect if we get one more massive gap down, it should be ready to go after that. In terms of Tesla specific options flow, surprisingly kind of mixed, arguably a little bit more bearish than bullish, of course, but surprisingly kind of mixed. Towards the end of the day, also pretty mixed flow. I look at this and I don't really see anything obvious, right? Compared to, let's say, when we were looking at this, you see towards the end of the day, a lot of puts came in here, a lot of puts for early next week. Some calls, but a lot more puts than calls. So yeah, guys, it's a kangaroo market. Hey, it is what it is. It's a tough market we're in. Absolutely no questions asked. That's why I'm mainly just shares. Worst case scenario, I sell options. yeah, it's a tough market. So let's see how this plays out. But the main thing I'll be watching for is, does this bearish scenario play out, where at the very least will come down to about the 220s retest. And, you know, it does now officially technically put into the equation a lower low on Tesla stock coming into the 180s. That absolutely becomes, you know, something you should be mentally prepared for. That, you know, that is a possibility now. Or is it the more bullish perspective with this bull flag? Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think, guys. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow or Monday. Peace.